Hey, what's up, y'all? So I want to do a brief recap of the meeting that we had here recently on interpreting symptoms and self-testing. The entire meeting has been segmented. It's in the courses. And we had a little audio technical difficulties at the beginning, so the audio quality is not as good as it normally is, but you can still hear it. Very solid info. We had a really good little motivational pep talk, and then we went through in detail some of the stuff I'm going to touch on today. This is what, week 7 and 8 in this progression. That's about 2 months in. And regardless of whether you're brand new to this stuff or a veteran and going back through it, that's a pretty significant period of time to be really tinkering with this stuff. And the great thing is that the benefits that you're experiencing are going to stay with you for the rest of your life. And imagine this is just 2 months for the rest of your life. Imagine doing this for 6 months, a year, 3 years, 5 years. Your benefits accumulate over time, and you're going to feel more and more and more amazing. That's the magic and beauty of what we're doing here. And this is a livable way of doing things for a lifetime. So in the very beginning, we made this solid argument for our definition of real food. We talked about the purpose of eating real food. We're eating for nutrients to facilitate this body, the structure and form and function of this body. And we're also eating in a way that nurtures metabolic flexibility and fat burning. And at that first meeting, we placed a really large emphasis on reading labels and making sure that at a minimum, we're always choosing things made with good ingredients. At the next meeting, we talked about the importance of transitioning to being a real foodie, seeing yourself as a real foodie, and moving away from those approved items because they're probably not serving our goals, and just turning to those things on special occasions, very rare occasions. We also talked about how you can enhance metabolic flexibility. A lot of us started to move towards 2 meals a day, naturally, effortlessly. The things that we want to do to enhance metabolic flexibility are basically restricting our carbohydrates, being strategic with them, making sure they're from real food sources in smaller amounts, and also embracing space in between meals. And that's why most of us kind of gravitate towards this 2 meals per day, effortlessly and naturally again. But then we're getting a lot of space, we're getting a lot of fat burning, and we're also minimizing our carbohydrates while still enjoying them, and then just trying to be a real foodie. At the next meeting, we experimented with low carb, and that means that we pulled out the dominant sources of starch and sugar, which for us are our safe starches and fruits, probably most of the approved items, and that was the experiment for a couple weeks. So now here we are after that low carb experiment, and preface this with, if you were ready for it, like this is all in your own time and what you're comfortable with. Maybe you're just learning this stuff and you're not ready for low carb, and you're not ready for self-testing and trying to interpret your symptoms. But regardless, the information is good to have. But if you tried that low carb experiment for a little bit, the first thing that we talked about at this meeting was some of the FAQs that came up around it, like reading labels. You don't have to, when you're doing a low carb experiment, eliminate anything that has any resemblance to sugar in it. So if I have some bacon that has a few grams of sugar in it, that's not a big deal. If I have some condiments that have some sugar in it, that's not a big deal. What we're looking to do is eliminate the dominant sources of starch and sugar, because that's where the majority of our carbohydrate signal comes from, okay? A lot of us experienced some transitional difficulties. I did. I always do when I go low carb for the first few days. Some headaches, some constipation, some slower bowel movements. If you're experiencing constipation regularly, reach out to me because I deal with that kind of stuff all the time. Headaches are usually a transitional difficulty. And then most of us experienced some body composition changes. Like we felt leaner and tighter, and once we made it through that initial transitional period, we felt really good from it. So low carb is not something we recommend doing forever. It's a temporary tool. It's something that if we found benefit from, we can use it over and over and over again in the future. Maybe sprinkle it in here and there. For some of us, we like to do alternate day low carbs, or try to get 2 or 3 days of low carb in a week, or maybe a week of low carb in a month, or something along those lines. So now we're at this point, we've been eliminating carbs, and we have an opportunity to bring carbs back in and do it with awareness. So this is a perfect opportunity to talk about developing a honed intuition. Now, what a lot of us notice at this point in the progression is, because we've been eating real food and following these guidelines and reading labels, most of us notice that the cleaner we get, the more that we notice when things mess with us. It's almost as if when you were doing the wrong thing, you were numb to the signals, and now that you're doing the right thing, if you have some of those things you used to have before, you totally notice it and feel it. It's like, it's a blessing and a curse at the same time. I think it's great because it's giving you feedback that this is really not something good for your body, right? So another thing that we talked about at this meeting was developing a honed intuition. And really what we mean by that is, I think it's a natural part of the progression. A natural part of being a real foodie is just noticing and paying attention to symptoms and the way things make you feel, and asking these really intuitive questions like, what's causing this? What's contributing to this? How can I make this better? Something along those lines, right? That happens automatically for a lot of us because we're more sensitive to the things that kind of mess with us. We also talked about the importance of being consistent with your health habits as you're trying to figure this stuff out. Because in the context of consistency with my rise time, my bedtime, my workouts, my meals, whatever experiment that it is that I'm trying to tinker with, if I have consistency with my other health habits, then it's easy for me to notice what it is that's contributing to the way that I'm feeling. If I have really kind of random, haphazard health habits, it's hard for me to tell what's contributing to the way that I'm feeling. All right? So consistency with health habits as you're moving forward is really, really important, because within that context of consistency, it's easy to notice things that are messing with you, and it's easy to pick up on what things are contributing to those things that you're feeling. Right? Over time, we're always going to want to be going without something for the purposes of seeing how it makes us feel. So when we went through this low carb experiment, basically we were going without carbohydrates for the purposes of seeing how we feel. And now it's a perfect time to bring these foods back in with awareness to see how we respond to these specific starches and fruits. So then we talked about symptoms, and how symptoms are one way that your body communicates with you. It's telling you something. If something doesn't make you feel good, that's really useful information. And if we want to optimize the way that we look, feel, and perform, we have to pay attention to these signals the body's giving us. Over the years, I have tinkered with a lot of different testing protocols. Early in my NTP career, we went through some functional evaluations and interpreting symptoms, and we would do these, I can't remember what we call it, those neurolingual testing using these vascular points and neurovascular points and reflex points in the rib cage and intercostal spaces and stuff, and that was really useful. I've been through some applied kinesiology. We did that for a couple of years. But I've just got a lot of different resources that I pull from to interpret symptoms from a functional perspective. And when you boil it all down, you get a really clear message about what your body's really trying to say. What we did is we kind of grouped the different symptoms that you can experience into 4 main categories. The first one and the main one is digestion. All right, digestion, most people come into eating real food or the SHT and they have some kind of digestive issues going on, because eating inappropriate foods inhibits digestion. You don't get the nutrients that you need for strong digestion, and you have this toxic overload that inhibits digestion. A lot of us, including myself, were on like proton pump inhibitors and reflux medication, and so we just have years and years and years of messing with our digestive system. So main things to pay attention to would definitely be digestion. The way to resolve digestive issues is to address the things that we talked about in a previous video on strengthening digestion. You'd want to support your upper GI acidity, you want to support your bile flow, and you want to support your enzyme activity so you're breaking down all your nutrients. So digestive symptoms are something to pay attention to. Skin issues are another big category of things that a lot of us will experience. Again, we're talking about fine-tuning and optimizing our way of doing things, paying attention to these different signals our body has given us so we can eliminate the things that are causing us problems. Or maybe we have a nutritional deficiency that we need to bring in to help us feel better. So skin issues are huge. Usually skin issues are related to digestive issues. They kind of go hand in hand. A lot of skin issues have to do with gut permeability, which is one of the reasons that we advocate avoiding gluten and grains, because gluten and grains are one of the strongest sources of gut permeability in the American diet. But also skin issues and digestive issues, but skin issues can be an indication of some kind of a food intolerance. I discussed my story over the years. When I first started out, I just felt better all the way around. And then after I got about 5 years in, I started developing this patch of eczema on my foot, and it was just completely random. I felt like it was random. And I thought it was athlete's foot initially. I was always scratching it, and then it started cracking and bleeding. And I didn't want to admit it, but I kind of had an idea it might have been because we were allowing beer for a while, because beer's fermented, and we felt like the gluten content was reduced through the fermentation process. And sure enough, I pulled beer out, and that thing cleared up. Now, the residual effects from having a beer, I would have that patch of eczema on my foot for 3 to 4 weeks later, before it would completely heal up, which gives you an idea of how long things kind of stay in your system. So, and then now that I've completely eliminated gluten from my diet, I don't have that patch pop up. And now I got new patches popping up. I got this weird patch on the side of my foot. I got some patches behind my knee that are really itchy sometimes. And I'm ultra clean with what I'm doing. So I'm like, what in the world is causing that? And come to find out, I feel like it's cassava or tapioca. And I'm almost positive about it, but I'm not 100%. I'm still figuring that out, because I'll have an exposure from something that someone makes at a potluck or something, and it'll be a random exposure, and I think that's what it is. I kind of almost have an idea that it might also be whiskey, because whiskey is created from the remains of creation of beer, although it's distilled, it's supposed to be gluten-free. But anyway, it's just really interesting to me to think I've got this thing popping up in my skin that's making me feel a certain way. And if that's popping up on my skin and manifesting on my skin, then what kind of damage is happening internally for that to manifest itself? I want to optimize this to the best of my abilities. So anyway, we're talking about skin issues. So this is an example of something that I'm consuming periodically here and there is causing some kind of a problem, and it's manifesting as a skin issue. And I talked about in the meeting, some of these little indicators for me are like my greatest gifts, because they keep me on track. They tell me that I can't go off. I can't do this because it's going to make me feel this way. So I think looking at it as a very positive thing versus being in a restrictive diet, we have this situation where when you get your body really optimal, it has this capacity to communicate with you when things don't feel right. Another category we talked about was energy and mood. Okay, so again, we're thinking about these big areas to pay attention to optimize your way of doing things. We got digestive symptoms that can be an indication, skin issues that can be an indication. Sometimes those go together, and then we've got energy that can be an indication, and then mood that can be an indication. Now those things go together. Remember, we talked about energy equals mood condition sometimes, but not always. So a lot of times when you have energy issues, it could be a blood sugar handling thing, it could be a stress and adrenal thing, it could be a sleep thing, but it's really good feedback. And then also your mood condition. A lot of times that has a lot to do with your response to blood sugar handling, and then also how your adrenals are performing under stress, or whether you're getting enough sleep or something along those lines. So those are the main things that we recommend people kind of pay attention to. And then we went through a bunch of symptom examples that are over in the course. I think one of the greatest insights that we touched on was that from a functional perspective, when you strengthen your digestion, everything else in your system gets better, because your digestive system is your first line of defense. It's your first exposure to the outside environment. And so if you get your digestion really strong, then you'll notice a lot of your other symptoms start to resolve. So then we moved into talking about self-testing and self-testing protocols. And at a minimum, we just want to pay attention to how things make us feel through general awareness testing. And really all that is just paying attention to the things that we just talked about. And as you notice things that seem a little bit off, then you're asking those intuitive reflective questions and trying to figure out what those things are. We also talked about intuitive self-testing. Intuitive self-testing would be sitting at the dinner table and getting calm and relaxed and putting some kind of a food or nutrient in your mouth that you think is somewhat suspect, and just holding it in your mouth and paying attention to how your body responds to it. Because sometimes if you put something toxic in your mouth, your body will have an immediate reaction. That's what the throw up reflex and gag reflex is all about. But sometimes even just having something in your mouth, you'll notice your congestion start to manifest or something like that. You'll get some tears, some mucus, some saliva. You'll notice some digestive upset. You'll notice an energy dip. There's all kinds of things that you can receive as signals just from having a food in your mouth. And then we talked about our third testing protocol, which is pulse testing. You can take that intuitive testing to another level by taking your pulse before consuming a meal, taking your pulse after a meal, and seeing if your body gets stressed out from the meal, because an increased pulse rate is usually an indication of your body getting a little bit stressed out. If you can pinpoint a meal that is causing you a little bit of stress, then you can start to isolate specific foods and take your pulse before and after foods and see how specific foods resonate with you. So that was really fascinating stuff. we ended the meeting talking about our safe starches and why we call our safe starches safe. Mainly, our safe starches are safe implies that there's something not good about other sources of starch. So our safe starches are safe because they're not very high in sugar. We differentiate between starch and sugar. We understand that we have to cook our safe starches in the appropriate fats. And then safe starches, the main thing I would say is that they're relatively void of anti-nutrients. And if we look in the plant world at things like seeds and grains and legumes, especially, we'll see a lot of anti-nutrients, a lot of things that cause digestive issues, a lot of things that contribute to gut permeability, and safe starches are relatively void of those things. Now, they're not completely benign, because here I am noticing that I think cassava and tapioca are contributing to a little bit of a skin issue, but they're definitely safer than some of the grains and seeds and things that are out there. So that's how we kind of finished the meeting, and just to kind of bring it back to what are our goals going forward, depending on where you're at in this progression. First of all, we just want to have this mindset of developing a honed intuition. We want to have this mindset of, I just always want to be paying attention to how my body responds to things, so I can optimize my way of doing things and just have the best health I can possibly have. Also, we want to start to use general awareness with foods as we're consuming them moving forward. And then if we were successful with our low carb experiment, or even if we weren't, we can still do this experiment. We want to start to bring in safe starches through self-testing protocols. What we usually recommend is that you have one safe starch per evening for 3 nights, like the same safe starch. So if you wanted to test for rice, you would maybe go low carb for a few days and then bring in rice for a few nights in a row, paying attention to how you feel. And you could even do the self-testing with intuitive testing or pulse testing, and this way you can customize your way of eating as far as carbohydrates go. What I've noticed over the years is that I do really well on white rice and sweet potatoes, and white potatoes wreck me. And maybe because it's a nightshade, maybe because there's something else in it, I'm not sure. But we definitely want to use this opportunity of being low carb to bring in our starches to see how they make us feel. And so we can customize our way of eating around that, all right? That doesn't mean, if you come out of this and you learn that something in the real food realm doesn't feel very good with you, that doesn't mean you have to avoid it all the time. It's still approved in our world. You just know that for you as an individual, it's something that you just don't do really well on, okay? So I think that sums it up. In a couple of weeks, we have our final meeting, and this is all about elimination diets. And we're gonna talk about some really, really cool, powerful stuff that I haven't included in previous progressions. And we're gonna talk about how to incorporate everything that we've learned into your daily life moving forward, so that you can abide by all these different principles and also get the most benefit out of this and make this work in a modern lifestyle. So we're also going to try to have a finale dinner at Texas Day Brazil. So I'm still getting confirmation about whether we can do that or what the rules and guidelines are around that. So we'll see what happens with that, okay? So if you guys have any questions whatsoever, please reach out to me. I'm here. I'm living a life of service. I want to see you guys see the results that you want to see. So just stick with it and give us your comments, questions, and feedback, okay? We'll talk to you guys soon.